Hello and welcome to another edition of My View from the Piano Bench. We do this every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. here on my Joel Holt's Notes YouTube channel, along with Piano for My Friends every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. And that's where I play a cocktail hour style piano. Maybe I'll use the word style loosely there. And on Wednesday nights for this series, I talk a little bit about music or my experiences or things that might be interesting to you. Thank you for those of you who watch and watch regularly, and especially to those of you who support me via the means available and the links available on the support page of my website, which you'll see a link to in the video description. Drop on a tip jar is always appreciated. And if you watch regularly, take a look at the Patreon. It's another take on it. So again, thank you, and off we go. And the topic today is dividing time. And now I just realized I should have refamiliarized myself with the song Time on My Hands. Let me see. And I forget the rest of it. Well, that's a missed opportunity. But what I'm not talking about is what people typically would mean when they say dividing time, which is basically task management. You know, I'm going to take the time I have, I'm going to put so much here, and I'm going to put so much there. Which, when I think about it that way, is such a linear approach to time, and the longer I do any of this, just the longer I'm alive, the less linear my world is, or my perception of it is. So when a musician talks about time, they're talking about things related to the pulse, or the beat, or the feel. And it's really all about the time. And it doesn't matter what kind of music you're playing. It doesn't matter if you're playing classical music or any other kind of music, because time and the organization that it provides is the foundation, is the delivery system in which all of this musical communication happens. And without the time, the communication would really not make sense. And I tried this once, I think in the previous series to this, where I took a familiar tune and I played it so out of its original time that it was unrecognizable. And we'll just accept that as the premise, that time is important, and then how you portion that time or dissect that time is kind of what we're talking about. And different dissections or different groupings of beats and pulses will create different feels. And so here's an example of one feel that's a kind of a go-to, kind of a Latin bossa nova feel. not intended to play that tune all the way through and into a second chorus and improvise on it. But as I'm playing, I'm thinking, which I can do, don't think about what you're playing, think about something else, right? And I was thinking that it might be a good illustration to keep playing and bring up right now what I'm also going to bring up later, that the idea of the time, it's not like playing that song Meditation by Joe Beam, is not like getting the rhythm or the melody right and counting it out and figuring out what it is, or getting the rhythm of anything right. Yeah, you're going to get it right, but you're going to get it right because you feel it as something, not because you arrange it as something mechanically. And the best way to illustrate that is to continue the feel and then improvise something else over it. So the thing that was consistent about that, hopefully, was it was a similar feel. What's probably not consistent is beats per minute, right? I tend to speed up sometimes and actually slow down other times, which is essentially just being human. But that was a particular feel, an arrangement of organizing beats or pulses externally and internally, perhaps, looking at groups of them and then dissections of them. So let me play a couple other examples of different feels, and I won't play these nearly as long. Very short, but whole different division. Right? So that would be like completely unlike the bossa nova. That would be a waltz. Probably a little too fast to dance to. Maybe like that, right? And grouped in 3, right? And then, let me see. Little swinging tune. And so on. 3 completely different feels. Now, the thing about a beat and a pulse is those terms can be used interchangeably, but they're really often not. And beat is often referred to more what you count, and pulse is obviously more what you feel. And so hopefully when I'm playing something, it portrays the beat or the pulse, right? And that's the thing, and if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard me go here, that is, to me, almost malpractice in beginner piano lessons, where everything is taught mechanically. You add it all up and it works. And I know that that's totally valid, and it is a way that a lot of people can relate to it. In fact, relate best. But what the music has to do is it has to communicate a pulse, communicate time. And that can be done in the very first piano lessons, concurrent with everything else that's learned. And then you get a lot of young piano students who, you're not going to tap your foot to. Speaking of tapping your foot, so I'm going to play a tune, and what I want you to do is I want you to feel the pulse I'm portraying. And I want you to tap your foot. And then I can't observe you tapping your foot. If you were in person, I would, and I would tell you what you're doing. Chances, I mean, there's a few things you could be doing, and I'm going to tell you what they are afterward. So let me just play a little bit and just feel and let your foot tap wherever it wants to tap. Oh, all right. If I only, but that's another subject. Huh. And I realized as I'm like 2/3 of the way through that chorus that I should probably pull back on like overtly expressing pulse by striding ish the left hand. And so I pulled back on that. And when I did, and I stopped doing that, you didn't change how you tap your foot, right? I may have kind of led you into it by how I played, or maybe not. But hopefully you can hear or experience that it's a consistent pulse throughout. So the likelihood is that you tapped your foot on 1 and 3. And of course, that's not my foot, but my foot doesn't reach up there. But what you could have done is you could have tapped your foot on all 4 beats counts of the measure, right? So that measure, and I didn't define this, that basic division of this tune is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's just now a matter of where you're feeling the pulse in that organization of 4. 1, 3, 4. And you could have felt it like that. Or if you're like really hip, you could have actually tapped your foot on 2 and 4 instead of this, which is actually, you know, where the pulse is. The backbeat, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's often where we clap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. My foot goes down on 1. Foot goes down on 1 and 3. All I got to do is, you know, transfer this to the other foot, and I'm playing drums and a bass and a hi-hat. But I don't play drums, so we won't even go there. So the pulse is obviously something that can be interpreted both by the performer or the musician and the listener, right? And there's, you know, variations on the theme, but you can see that it's entirely organized and needs to be organized. And the important thing, and this is specifically the thing that could be introduced to beginner students immediately and isn't, I do, is define where 1 is. Always know where 1 is. Now, is it important to like read music and get everything precise? Yes. That's a skill. That's an interpretive skill. What's more important, though, is to be able to get that rhythmic precision of, quarter notes and dotted quarter notes and rest and blah, 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 and get that into a communication that you feel. And that communication that you feel is not simply because you divided everything correctly on a mechanical level. It's because you're feeling it, right? And I'll make some eyebrows go up, particularly of classical musicians. If I say, okay, if we're playing together, or something's going on, let's make sure we define the one. Everything else is fair game. What? Yeah. Define the one. Now, I don't mean that the steadiness of the time doesn't exist. Because if your one is steady, everything else is going to get steady. You're not going to have a steady one and then trip and fall down the steps every measure, and like you're inebriated. That is so funny. I'm going to tell this story. And he probably doesn't watch his stream, but I'm even going to name him. Maybe I won't. I won't name him. And this is not related, but it's just a really funny story. You may have heard me tell it before. Many, many years ago, playing a wedding reception with a little trio, bass player, drummer, and myself. And the drummer is a certified goofball, impulsive, ridiculous, lots of fun. And he noticed that during the reception, at the top of the winding, not spiral, but the winding staircase that comes down in this, mansion-y building we were in, the groom was at the top of the steps, and he was he had imbibed to a reasonable degree, and it was kind of obvious in the fact he wasn't really steady. And my drummer friend said to himself, "He's going down." And he said later he tried to help himself, but he couldn't, as when he did actually come rolling down the steps, the drummer played him down with a big cymbal crash at the end. And then he wanted to go hide that he did it, right? So everything's got time. Everything has a pulse. Anyhow, you know where one is. So the first part about the dividing is the dividing the one into groups of like 4 or 3 or 2, right? So let me play a couple of divisions of 4. I already demonstrated it, but I'm going to get into it a little more. So here's a kind of a semi-stereotype, but it's easy to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So that would be a measure or a grouping of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I'm clapping on 2 and 4. But okay, now here is another style of playing with a grouping of 4. And ever so slightly retarded or slowed down at the end, which is something you do without disrupting the time, just gradually slowing it down a little bit, stretching it, rubber banding it, and that kind of lets you know you're ending. And typically I would do it more dramatic than that. And you might now have a little bit of awareness of how you tap your foot, You probably did that. I mean, you could have tapped your foot twice every beat. That's where we're going, but we're not there yet. So that's a division of 4. Okay, here's a division of 3, one way. Not a division of 3, I'm sorry. Here's a grouping of 3. That one actually could be considered on the fence of 2 different things, but is typically understood as 3. A 1, 2, 3. Not overtly stated, but stereotypically overtly stated. 1, 2. Right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Grouping of 3 beats or pulses, or 2. And the best illustration of 2 would be a march. Now, grouping of 2, grouping of 3, grouping of 4. And despite the fact that you've all heard of a song called Take 5, or you might be aware that some meter signatures, or what sometimes called time signatures, have 6 a measure, or 7, or 8 or 9. you really only group in 2, 3, or 4. You can actually argue you only group in 2 or 3. But four is a grouping of two twos, but an unequal grouping where there's obviously a front edge to it. So it's not, equal to. The march, oh no. I did not intend this. Okay. And I guess, if I'm going to go down this road, I could play polkas, Right? Division of 2. Now, grouping beats together in 2, in a measure of 2, is now the place where it's easiest to discuss not just organizing the beats, but dividing them up. And back to a half hour ago when I said dividing the time, that's what I was talking about. It's about taking this pulse. I should have done this. I can still do it. Okay, anyway. So there's my beat. And I'm dividing it in half. So that's a basic division. Sounds like a march, doesn't it, right? And if I divide in 2, then I can divide in 2 twice into 4. Everything is like a division of 2. That's one way to divide the beat. And if you play piano or took piano lessons, or if you remember the old counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, three dancers all day long. Bugs Bunny cartoons always pop in my head. Now don't forget your lines. Oh, sorry. Okay, back on task. So the basic division of a beat or pulse is in 2, unless it's in 3. So let me give you a subtle example playing another march. Say, I didn't hear 3, I heard 2. Yeah, you heard 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. But those 1, 2s were divided into 3 apiece. As opposed to this. So the same speed of the beat was dividing it in half or 3. You can hear me go back and forth. So if you're a student of piano, the 2 big management issues, or 2 of them, are going to be 2-hand coordination at first, and then it's going to be being able to really feel and divide a pulse, right? And to go between 2 and 3 like I did. Now, you can do that with 3 counts a measure or 4 counts a measure. And now I have to decide how technical I want to get. So let me put a metronome on and let me demonstrate the idea of dividing a pulse. And I'm going to contradict myself a little bit because you can divide it into anything, right? But functionally, in terms of music that you're likely going to listen to, or if you play music you're going to play, it's always going to be either 2 or 3, or some combination of 2 and 3, right? But just to kind of demonstrate the, and I'll turn this up a little bit. Right? You can hear that, I'm sure. Right? And this is something that if you do play music or have a relationship to music, or just want to challenge yourself, and you have the ability to have a steady pulse. Metronome apps are free, by the way, at this point, so anybody can get one on their phone, right? Well, free meaning you get advertising blared at you and little things where I need my trifocals to see it. All right, but here is the metronome set at 60 beats a minute, 1 per second. And here's divided in 2. Right? And that would be your first skill set. Your second skill set would be to jump in and divide it in 3. And if you're not used to it, it takes a little while and you wind up doing something like that. But then you learn eventually to evenly space them out. Then when you have that conquered, then you want to drive yourself crazy by actually being able to just go between 2 and 3. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, ba, ba, dee, 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 dee. 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 4 right in a row. Do ba ya dun 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 dun. Right? And now you're starting to feel it, because this is often the feeling place. And then, if you can do it I forget which hand I did which. So, now I'm doing 2 at the same time, a 2 and a 3. I remember in my freshman year of college, in my music theory class, the professor was talking about some busker, some street performer somewhere that he saw that had like a bunch of hoops. And one was a hula hoop and then smaller hoops. And I think it was 5 hoops. 1 around the belly, 2 arms, 1 foot, his leg. And the for every 1 hula hoop was 2 of one arm, 3 of another arm, 4 on the leg, and 5 around the neck, or something like that. So all at the same time. So that's, I mean, and that's of course serious skill. But just to, here's 2, 3, and I'll keep going. 4, 5, 6. Wait for that first one. 7, 8. And that one I can barely do. Because I'm not a percussionist that way. But you can see how I'm dividing that time up. All right, now let me give you some examples again of this 2 and 3. And the proper terms are duple and triple meter. Duple meter thing. And triple meter, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Right? Now, what you're going to wind up hearing, especially in like a march feel, is you're going to hear an uneven feel for the triple, because you're like playing two of them tied together in one. So it's long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, dun, 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 dun. So that unevenness tells you that it's actually divided in three, because it's certainly not two equal parts, right? Here's two equal parts. Now if I played all three, or capped all three, right? So let's go back to the march, and because this is not a music lesson per se, and you know, I'm not just picking the musicians, so I don't want to get too wonky technical, but you're probably aware that there's two numbers at the beginning of a piece of music, and they tell you how you're grouping the time, and also, if you know how to read it properly, how you're dividing the time, the pulse. Excuse me. 2, 4. The 2 on top is 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Right? Now, it's not going to make sense, but if it's triple meter, it's actually 6/8. And it's interpreted differently there, because you say for the total of 2 pulses, there are 6 divisions, right? What came in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Kind of too fast to count, and you certainly wouldn't tap your foot. You know, all 6 times you could. I can't move my foot that fast. You would tap your foot twice. So, it's an interesting thing to think about if you're inclined to be analytical sometimes when you listen to music, to try to discern the meter, right? Now, let me wait. And let me just play something. I'll just play a tune. Because I haven't played a tune front to back, and I have no idea what to play, because I didn't really think I was going to do that. I just heard myself do something that prompted me to stop and point it out. I played a little like moving figure of a 3 against 2 in that tune, which is something that I like to do. But that was 2, 1 and 2 and 2. So maybe you were a little more attentive to the grouping of the pulse and the division of the pulse. Okay? Now, the 3 is, well, let me do this. Let me play 2 more tunes with 3, because I've only played them in a march, right? So here would be an example, at least one more tune, of a triple meter in a tune you'd recognize. So I'm so used to floaty rhythm, and or like I'm really comfortable floating divisions over themselves, but I purpose to try to demonstrate something in a straight way, and a 2 against 3, and internally I wanted to float other pieces of it, and I actually came apart slightly. So I'm not really super regimented, but the regimentation is vital to have a grasp of, whether or not you're, because we're all ourselves in this process. But grouping of 4, tap your foot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 beats a measure. So if you have a song like this, 2, 3, 4, which is the division of 2, 1 and 2 and right, that would be considered 4/4. This, to portray 4 beats a measure, pulses, the triple meter would be 12/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, 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 blah. What was that? Well, you may have heard of the idea of triplet, okay? That when you're playing in duple meter and you play like 3, a grouping of 3 instead, a triplet. A duple or duplet is, I'm not sure which term now that I'm put on the spot, is a division of 2 against a background of 3. 1, right? So let me see if I can keep the 3 going in my left hand. Something like that. Okay? So all super subtle things, right? But now you can sort of get a sense of what's behind music. If it's uneven, right? 6/8. Now, something that's cool, and musicians know this, but if you don't know this, it's really interesting to think about. The idea of swing, especially of that era when it happened, when it was part of the culture, when ragtime feel music started swinging in 1920, 1930, everything just swung. And it basically feels like 3. But it's actually not exactly 3. Swing, close to 3, but it's not exactly 3. And scholarly people will argue that it's, I mean, some people will argue that it's a triplet. Some people will argue that it's the division of a group of 5 divided in 3 and 2. A small minority of people on either side. And most would understand it to be somewhere in between and movable and not notatable. So the one kind of rhythm feel that you cannot notate is swing. I'm talking about what goes on inside this pulse, right? And that's why young musicians in this culture, really have to often work to swing and often don't swing, or people who weren't exposed to it, because it's a cultural thing, and you really have to live there. And the old school jazz guy, the tacit little question hanging over everything is, yeah, but can they swing, right? So now maybe you have a little more appreciation or idea of what happens with the music you listen to. And when you're tapping your foot, that's organizing the time. And then in between those foot taps, there is a secondary organizational system, right? And that's what I'm talking about by dividing the time. Now, in traditional music, in the classical music era, and the people my age and older who took piano lessons, and even now, you learn everything mechanically, and then you put it together. And you often hear me use the illustration of putting a jigsaw puzzle together. And for some personality types, that's exactly how you're going to make music. You're going to put the jigsaw puzzle together. But the other way, and this is my approach, rather than go from the inside out, like put it all together and all the parts line up and there it is, right? That would be the classical music approach. Me would be from the outside in, right? So it's like, I'm going to feel like, for example, if I have a tune that has a certain feel, or I need to find a certain feel, I will, if I'm learning a tune, or let's take an original tune that I'm accompanying somebody, I'm going to find some other tune that has some kind of feel like that and superimpose the feeling and move it over, just like, Meditation, this Jobim tune, that bossa nova feel, or a tune that everybody would know, same feel. Right? So let me take that feel and let me play it over this tune. bossa nova feel. Instead of 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Right. So I can manipulate all sides of that equation. And now it all kind of starts to get fuzzy because it is like, can be really technical, you know, and just like the harmonic aspects of music can be really technical. And diagrams and mathematical divisions and yada, yada, yada. It just kind of simplifies, though, to tension and release. Everything is about tension and release. So anyway, I'm just going to play one more tune. And I won't play all the things you are. I'll play something. I have no idea what. And maybe I'll move around the time inside of it. Maybe I won't. Ah, here we go. And we won't try to analyze this now. We'll just be aware that there's stuff going on. just some things to think about, as if we don't have enough to think about. Maybe it's a nice distraction, or maybe now you have a headache and I'm sorry. So, hope to see you tomorrow night for Piano for My Friends, and see you around in person if possible. Thanks so much.